All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Today was a sad day here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, where the X Zone is located with our broadcast center here in Hamilton. Today we had a funeral in town of Corporal Nathan Cirillo. Now, this is the Canadian Armed Forces member who was shot down in Ottawa on October the 22nd as he stood as an honor guard at the War Memorial at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. You had politicians, you had the Prime Minister of Canada, you had the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, you had the leader of the NDP, you had dignitaries, you had military top brass, and then you had the people of Hamilton lining the streets as they showed their heartfelt respect and said farewell to a fellow Hamiltonian, Corporal Nathan Cirillo. What did he do? He was protecting his country. He was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. They fight for our freedom, our democracy. We're at war, Exo Nation. Don't take anything so lightly as to say this is just an attack. This is a war. We've had 2 soldiers run down in Saint-Jean, Quebec, where one soldier passed. We've had another soldier shot and killed in Ottawa. That's our fellow Hamiltonian, Nathan Cirillo. And you have attacks in the United States. You had 2 police officers that were attacked with a hatchet. You had a decapitation in Oklahoma. You had other police officers shot. This is a war. My guest this hour is Islam analyst and author Dan Perkins. He is a master storyteller and the author of the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, which centers around Islamic nuclear terrorism against the U.S. Now, he is a nationally recognized expert on radical Islam. And joining me now is Dan Perkins. And Dan, always great having you here on the X Zone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to be back with you. This third time is the charm. When I saw the notice that you wanted me to back on, I was really excited because we've had some wonderful conversations, and I hope your audience has been as entertained as I have been, so I look forward to it.
What is going on in the world? Why is it that certain people cannot understand with what ISIS is doing, how they are manipulating the media, how they are manipulating social media, how they're getting kids to join up in numbers that the authorities can't understand? This year alone in Denmark, there's been over 256 people that have gone to fight with ISIS. What is the attraction, Dan, and why aren't politicians taking this much more seriously? You know, our Prime Minister calls it terror, and yet your president won't. Mm-hmm. Why?
Boy, there's a whole ton of questions in there, sir. I do want to. I'll do my best to try and answer all of them. I do want to make a point of how eloquent you were in talking about how the country and the people lined the streets, and for this young man who gave his life protecting the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. We're not so fortunate in our country. We have a president when a 2-star, a major general, was killed in battle in Afghanistan, was brought home to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Mm-hmm. There wasn't one member of the administration who came to that funeral. Nobody from the White House came to that funeral. And yet they sent 5 representatives to the funeral for the young man in Ferguson, Missouri. I know I'm going to answer this, and I'm answering it the way I've been thinking about it and the way I've been talking about it for months. And I know it's going to sound very unusual, but I've thought about this more than anything else because it's a question. How is it that we can't see them? How is it that they are attracting our young people all over the world?
Yeah.
And I've come to this conclusion, and I know it's going to sound crazy. It's because we have global economies that have nothing for our children to do. There's a reason why in Chicago they're killing 20 to 30 to 40 people every weekend, and in Philadelphia, and now back in New York again. When you have a situation where you've got young people, especially in our country, young black people, who have a horrendous 40% unemployment rate and have been in this condition for at least 6 years or longer, the first black American president, or the first American black president, I'm not sure which is the right terminology, but I don't really care about the political correctness. He's done nothing for them. And ISIS comes in, and they have people, they have full-time people whose job is social media.
Dan, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our first break of the hour. Dan Perkins is my special guest, and Dan and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X Zone Radio TV show 7/24/365, is www.xzoneradiotv.com. And our new X Zone channel on YouTube is youtube.com/xzonebroadnet.com. Or just it's X Zone Broadcast Net. That's what it is. They keep changing these things on me, Dan. They're driving me crazy. But
isn't it amazing how they get longer and longer and longer and longer, and you can't remember them all?
I know. You and I were talking about the difference on how the Canadian government stood behind the people of Canada, as well as were very much a part of our grieving at the loss of our two soldiers who were killed on Canadian soil, not fighting in Afghanistan, not fighting in Syria, not fighting anywhere else, but right here in Canada. And I'm surprised to hear that the American general, two-star general, didn't get any response or any respect or any representation from the White House.
No, they sent 5 people to the funeral of the young man who was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, and they sent nobody from the White House to that man's funeral. This is a 2-star general, the first one to die since Vietnam in combat.
You know, this whole thing with Ferguson is a totally different show, and I'd love to talk to you about that because I can't understand what it is all about. Now, forensic evidence is swaying that, what may have been thought about the altercation not being real really happened. And, when you look at what's happening with ISIS, what's happening within Ferguson, my way of thinking is that ISIS would take top billing on this. And if I had a general who was fighting a war, that would take precedent over what's happening in Ferguson. Mind you, I can see why the president is patronizing the people in Ferguson. I don't agree with it. There are so many other shootings that the president doesn't get personally involved with.
In his own hometown of Chicago.
Exactly.
30 to 40 people a weekend.
Yeah. And
a young black man. You said something that was very impressive. That shows the difference between your government and my government. You said your government grieved. Your government supported your military.
Yeah.
and the town stood by and watched his casket go by and lined the streets.
Yeah.
Your country is grieving for a loss of 2 soldiers in a country, I don't know how big the country of Canada is, but you're grieving, and you respect the military, you respect what these young men were doing with their lives, and you grieve them. And in our country, I don't think our president, when the reporter got his head, the first reporter fully was beheaded, within moments the president was out playing golf. It's a horrendous message that he's sending to the rest of the world about what he cares about for the quality of human life and people in this war zone, and people being killed in the United States and now people in Canada. I will say to you that I was shocked, not in a disappointing way, how quickly, because we don't do it here, but how quickly your military and your police officials were ready to call it an act of terrorism, and there was no equivocation about that. And at the same time, they didn't know for sure whether there were more shooters or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to that video probably a half a dozen times, and I had heard early in the day that the man had a shotgun, but yet when you listen to the video, you hear 30 shots, and I can only conclude that he was clearly outgunned by all the security that was in the place. But yet, the perspective that we have in the United States, based on our media, which was somewhat, American mainstream media was somewhat critical of your government for the, quote, lax security at your government headquarters.
Yeah, I picked that up. I was watching CNN, and they said, well, especially the former FBI director, who was a commentator, Tom Fuentes, he says, well, I don't know why they didn't have this, they didn't have that. It's because this is Canada, for God's sake. We respect people. We don't go out looking for trouble. And it's we try to get the message across that Parliament is total transparency. If you want to go sit in the balconies and take in a parliamentary hearing, that is your right as a Canadian citizen. That is your right as a visitor to Canada.
Right. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I don't ask you to embarrass you because I'm really looking for facts.
Sure.
What percentage of the resident population in Canada is Muslim? Do you have any clue?
Wow. I would say
I don't know.
I would say based here in Hamilton, the numbers are increasing. I'd say it's anywhere from 10 to 15%.
Okay. And if so, you've got by extension, and I'm sure you've got a number of mosques.
Yes, we do.
In your country.
Yep.
And you probably have people in those mosques who are teaching certain things about Sharia law and about the Quran and how the people of Canada and the Canadian government is violating their laws. And they take these young men and women, and we use the word radicalize, but in reality, we're not radicalizing. We're converting them to Islam. Now, some of them may already be in the country legally as Muslims, and they maybe have been there for more than one generation. But these mosques that are developing a different way of life and a different message that is resonating with the young people, both males and females. More males, obviously, than females. But, we had this situation last week in Denver, Colorado, where there were three teenage girls who went to the airport to fly to Syria to visit their boyfriends who had gone over to Syria to fight with ISIS, and they were going to go over there to help, and the government was saying, we need women, we need babies, and we need to grow our population. And they left their house on a Friday morning, told their parents they were going to school, picked up the other girl, and before you know it, they were in Germany before the FBI found them.
By the way, I've got the statistics for you. According to Canada's 2011 National Household Survey, there were 1,053,945 Muslims in Canada, or about 3.2% of the population, making them the second largest religion after Christianity and the fastest growing religion in Canada.
And in the world.
Yeah.
Look at what's happened to the country of England and the country of Spain and the country of France, with the exploding Muslim population gaining more and more control, trying to change the French and English culture from their historical culture to a Muslim culture. And how much influence they already have in the governments.
Yeah, but you see, this is nothing new. This war with Islam, it's been going on for hundreds of years. This is nothing
1400.
new. Yeah. Now, one thing you'll see in Canadian Parliament are members of Parliament with turbans on. And yet, you wouldn't see that in the United States.
No, probably not. Probably not.
You have.
So let me ask
Sure.
you, let me ask you a question about this shooting.
Sure.
After this funeral today, how is it going to change life in Canada tomorrow? Will it eventually just disappear and nobody will care, or will there be changes in security at the Capitol, and will that soldier who's guarding the tomb be armed with real bullets?
Well, for one thing, there are new security measures in place. They are forming a one police force for the Parliament buildings instead of having parliamentary security, Ottawa Police, the RCMP, and the Ontario Provincial Police. There's going to be a one force police force that is going to be in place. For the first time, our Prime Minister here in Canada has 24-hour RCMP protection for the first time. Has it changed?
How does it make you feel? How does it make you feel?
I can tell you it very simply. On October the 22nd, 2014, Canada lost its innocence.
Even though it sent all those men and women to fight in the wars, it lost its innocence.
Yeah, because
with two soldiers.
With two soldiers being killed on Canadian soil by a terrorist organization.
That's got to be shocking to a lot of people.
It is. It truly is. You know, when I was watching the funeral today, there was every culture in the people that were lining the streets. You saw people with burqas. You saw people with turbans. You saw every ethnicity that you can imagine, and you could see the grief and the sorrow on each and every face.
Will it make you, what happened, will it make you look more suspiciously at somebody who's wearing a turban in the future?
No. No, it won't.
We have a program that you may be aware of here in the United States on the Fox News Channel. It comes on at 5 o'clock every day. It's called The Five. And one of the people on the panel is a liberal, very liberal Democrat whose name is Bob Burkle. And I saw him earlier in the week. And
whoops. You know what? You and I've got to take our news break. My producer just whispered in my ear, Rob, you're 20 seconds away from news. Stand by, Dan. This is a great conversation. Dan Perkins is a great guy. If you want to find out more about Dan Perkins, go to Google and Google Dan Perkins. Dan and I will be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Dan Perkins is my special guest this hour. And to find out more about Dan, where you can buy a copy of his trilogy, just go to just Google That would be the best way. Just Google Dan Perkins. Dan, before we went to the news break, we were talking about a commentator on Fox by the name of Bob Berkel.
Beckel. I mispronounced it. It was
Okay.
Beckel. He's a very liberal Democrat, and he was saying recently, I watched him, and he said, I'm uncomfortable if I get on a plane with somebody with a turban. Now, here is a liberal Democrat saying that he is uncomfortable. He has a bias to somebody who looks like they're Middle Eastern because he doesn't feel comfortable. I'm sure that the attacks have all affected us as they've affected you. We lost almost 3,000 on September the 11th.
That was horrific.
And I'm not saying that 3,000 is more important than 2.
Oh, I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying.
I was in New York at the time, and there were weeks before I could get through to people on the phones to find out whether they were dead or alive, and it was a very traumatic period. But I understand your characterization is that the innocence is gone, and I don't know if it's possible to ever get it back.
I don't think so.
I really don't. I know we are changed as a nation, and I got to believe Canada. I think that the most devastating that could happen one of the most devastating things that could happen to Canada is another attack.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
I hate
policeman or soldier.
I hate to say it, but I believe another attack is imminent.
Oh yeah, they're not done by any means.
Because you see, what I would have done if I would have been in the power of authority to make a decision, I would have gotten boots on that ground as fast as we could, just wipe them off the face of the earth until they cannot raise their ugly heads again and threaten any part or any person who enjoys freedom and democracy. That would be it.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this, and I've looked at it a lot over the last year or 2 years. I'm amazed at my own country. We had reports that over 10,000 women and children were beheaded and their heads were put on fence posts as a warning to the people in Iraq and Syria. 2 American reporters get their heads chopped off, and the American president is on the verge of collapse. And in reality, in my opinion, he has yet to recover from that. And then the Ebola outbreak, and again, the inadequacy of his administration, his people, to the Center for Disease Control. Yeah. I think we are, at least in our country, I'll speak only for America, I think we are at the lowest level of confidence in our government than I can remember in all my almost 70 years. And I would say to you, in all candor, and as you know now, this is our 3rd interview, I speak my mind. I'm actually afraid of what I don't know, that the government's not telling us. There are so many odds and end pieces that are not being talked about. And I'm afraid that we're going to start hearing about more than the people that are infected with Ebola, because the president tends to want to manage the news around the election cycle.
Exactly.
And so we may hear some very devastating things after the election. The president specifically has told the people to withhold. Yep. The president told his military advisors a month ago when they said to him, Mr. President, the approach we're taking in Syria and Iraq is not working, and we need to change. And he said, no, we're not going to do it. Now, I was around in the first Desert Storm with Bush 41, and I haven't seen a recent count, but the last count I saw was about 2 weeks ago. In the previous 60 days, the American and coalition forces had flown a total of 300 sorties in 60 days. That's roughly 5 a day. In Operation Desert Storm under Bush 41, they flew over 1,000 sorties a day.
Yeah, but no disrespect.
How are you going to?
No disrespect meant to your president and to the great people of the United States. There's a difference between George Bush and President Obama. George Bush was a fighter. He was a fighter.
Cowboy.
Exactly.
He was a cowboy.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And Barack Obama is a politician. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when you look at Russia compared to the United States, once again, no offense meant here, they have a warrior in charge.
Mm-hmm. They're a cowboy.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we think we have a president who thinks that if we just come to the table, I mean, we're going back to the table again in the next week to 10 days with Iran to talk about their nuclear program. And my guess is that the president is going to make even more concessions, and we're not going to gain anything. In fact, we're going to lose ground, and they're clearly on their way if they don't already have it, because they've made no concessions to the last two agreements. We've made all the concessions. The rest of the world has made all the concessions. We've agreed that Iran can continue to develop its nuclear potential. Insane, absolutely insane. You know, you cannot argue with these people. It's something we talked about, I think, maybe on our first show. What we don't understand is we don't know how to think the way they think.
Exactly.
We want to think about them in the way in which we think. And so when they do these outrageous things, when they attack police officers in New York, or they shoot an unarmed officer, even though he had a gun but he had no bullets, guarding a grave of the unknown soldier, I saw tonight that we have 24/7 guards now on the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington Cemetery, because they're afraid that somebody might do something similar to what happened in Canada to the soldiers who are walking the gravesite for us in the United States. The world, it's screwed up.
By the way,
we can't not do those things.
By the way, the soldiers in Ottawa who are standing honor guards at the Canadian War Memorial will not be having live ammunition in their rifles.
So just like the other one, they'll have no way to defend themselves.
What they're doing is they're looking at a perimeter security system where they are going to have law enforcement or military personnel on the roofs of buildings overlooking the war memorial, and using electronic surveillance to work and better protect those who are on honor guard detail who do not have any ammunition in their weapons.
But I'm sorry to be such a hard nose about this, but you don't have to be within 50 yards with a decent rifle to kill that soldier.
That's right.
And number one. Number two, and that perimeter guard, how well did that work out in the White House with 2 fence jumpers in the last 30 days? And the one guy, the last one to jump over, when the attack dogs came over to get him, he beat the hell out of the dogs. And only that he was subdued by the Secret Service. But we've got the President of the United States House. We've got these people that have jumped the fences, and one got inside the house with a knife. Where in the world was the security? So I understand what you're talking about. And let me be incredibly pragmatic with you, Rob. What is it going to cost to provide all that security that you just talked about on that perimeter every day?
Oh my gosh! I have no idea. I shudder to even think.
Yeah. So the reaction is we're going to put on all this technology, and we're going to put these people on the rooftops to protect the soldier. And somebody driving by in a car, unless they're going to limit the access to the area by car, can simply roll down the window, pull out an AK-47, and blow them away.
Or even toss a hand grenade.
Sure.
I mean,
I'm not trying to get into the nuances how it could be attacked, but you have to ask yourself, what are they spending to do this? So the question is, are we doing this to preserve a life or to preserve the memorial? And is there a less expensive way to do that? You said they're going to put a whole separate police force now. And you didn't say it, I'm saying it. A whole new police force whose responsibility will be for security for the Parliament building. And I think I counted on my fingers, there were at least currently 4 to 5 different police agencies, local and federal or national, that are responsible for security.
That's right.
And so now they decided they're going to have one, like we have in the United States, we have what's called the Capitol Police Force,
right,
which is separate from the district, and they have specific functions to secure government buildings. But again, what is it going to cost? And see, what people don't understand is that if you listen to the speech for the leader of Al-Qaeda 2 years ago, last September the 12th, his whole strategy with these lone wolf attacks is to cause exactly what happened in Ottawa. Divert resources away from the rest of the economy, spending more and more money on security because we're afraid we might be attacked again. So they're accomplishing exactly what they said they wanted to do through these lone wolf attacks. They're spending a significant amount of money to protect that memorial and to protect that 1 or 2 guards that are there. I'm not begrudging you the ability to do that. I'm saying you've played exactly into Al-Qaeda and ISIS's hands, and that is diverting resources away from other things in order to provide for security for Parliament or security for the war memorial. So they've accomplished exactly what they want to accomplish. They're forcing the Canadian government to redirect resources away from other things in order to provide for security for Parliament and the memorial.
They're really not taking the resources are already being spent there by having these different law enforcement agencies. All they're going to be doing is taking certain members from the different law enforcement agencies and bringing them into the parliamentary police. Like, they're not hiring new people for these positions. But there's a couple of things I'd like to say. Number one, Secretary Kerry was in Ottawa today, and he laid a wreath at the War Memorial. I found that very respectful. Very respectful. And number two, why doesn't anybody talk about all the people that get radicalized by Islam when they're in jail?
Or in the mosque.
Pardon?
Or in the mosque.
Exactly.
Too.
Like
jails and a mosque. Right.
Well, I don't know what goes on in a mosque. All right? I can only surmise. However, I do know for a fact that the majority of transformations that take place in jail when it comes to a religious philosophy, the number one is Islam. And
conversions.
Right. And then when you get these people that are released, well, hello. You know, you've got the enemy right under your nose.
What is the message that since you know about the prisons, what are the message that the Islamic prisoners are saying that is converting these people to Islam?
They're saying that...
What's the message?
The message is that they've basically gotten a bum rap, and that their talents would be better used fighting for their cause. That's how I see it.
Well, I think that you'll find out that that's exactly what's going on in the mosques. That's what's happening, why they're converting these people in Minneapolis and Chicago and all over the country more than the government is telling us. Because what they're saying, and it goes back to the way we started this whole discussion, it's really about money. It's money about the fact that the black community in the United States, young people are 40% unemployed.
Right.
Adults are almost 12% unemployed. And so they've been this way for a period of time, especially under the first black president. And they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake. They don't think the government cares about them. All these negative thoughts. And so they become extremely vulnerable to the message from Islam, come with us, and we'll pay your way to Syria or to Iraq.
Right.
We'll give you food, we'll give you housing, we'll give you clothes, we'll give you weapons in which you can kill Americans.
Oh, plus we'll even give you a wife. There you go. Listen, one quick question for you.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Ferguson. If it would have been a black officer who shot and killed a white person, would there be this riot? These protests?
No.
Would people be screaming?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because there is a belief by certain elements in our country that blacks are being persecuted.
Stand by. We've got to take our final break here, Dan. Please stand by. Dan Perkins is our special guest, Exo Nation. If you'd like to find out more about Dan, get copies of his book, just Google Dan Perkins. It's that simple. Dan and I will be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Exo Nation, Dan Perkins is our guest this hour. To find out more about Dan, simply go to Google, type in Dan Perkins. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. But you wanted to tell me about a radio host that you had something to say about.
Yeah, I had this opportunity to interview with this black man from Chicago.
Right.
And so I took the opportunity to say to him, let me ask you a question. Let's suppose that you had been living and on vacation during the summer, and you were in an island in the Pacific that didn't have television, didn't have radio, and you came back and you sat down at your television set and you looked at a split screen, and on the left-hand side of the screen were the ISIS terrorists attacking in Syria and Iraq. On the other side of the screen was this picture of this young man with a shirt around his face, with a gun, blowing the lock off the door, going to the convenience store. Would you see any difference? And he said, probably not. I said, let me ask you a question. We had Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson who came to Ferguson, Missouri to demand justice for the death of this young man. Why is it that Jesse Jackson says nothing, or the President of the United States, who is from Chicago, or Al Sharpton, says nothing about the genocide that's taking place in Chicago every weekend with black-on-black murders?
Yeah.
And he kind of stopped for a moment, and he said, well, that's a really good question, because we kicked Sharpton out because he's a phony, and Jackson hasn't been relevant, and the President's never been here to talk to anybody about what's going on. And so what we have is, in the case of Ferguson, we had racial tensions. Again, I know it sounds redundant to say it this way, Rob, but it's all done based on the fact that the poverty rate and the unemployment rate in the black section of Ferguson, Missouri, is like the rest of the black population in the United States. It's double the white population, and the young people is 4 times what it is the adult population.
Well, in all fairness, there are white communities where you have the same problem, and yet you don't have the high percentage of homicides that you do within the black community.
It is. It's an ever-changing attitude about, in all candor with you, sir, about a difference in the respect for human life. We've developed a society in our country, I'm sad to say, that no longer places a value on human life. I heard a commercial today for the fact that we'll do 1 million abortions in the United States this year. And I may have talked to you in one of my other 2 visits how that's support to the Muslim religion. Abortion is against every principle. And when we do it and we promote that we've killed 1 million babies, and we've killed 59 million or 60 million babies since Roe versus Wade, we are creating a tension between ourselves and the Muslims because what we do is counter to their religious belief. It's the same thing true when the courts talk about that a man can lay with a man and a woman can lay with a woman. That is abhorrent to the Sharia law and the Quran. It is not permitted under the Muslim faith. Yet we promote it. And in reality, if you look at the gay and lesbian and transgender bisexual community, the most recent number I saw is that it's less than 2% of the population of the United States. So look how much press it gets.
Dan, I'd love to talk to you more, but we're out of time for tonight. We'll have you back on in the near future. You can bet your dollar on that. But I want to thank you so much, Dan. Always a great pleasure talking to you. Keep the great work up, and I look forward to the next time you join me back here in the X Zone. Until then, my friend, be well and be safe.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.